As we
Every
gather in this
Christmas morning
season
at
of warmth and
6:47
reflection,
a.m.,
I extend
while
my
the world
heartfelt
sleeps and
thanks for your
even his
continued
closest staff
support and
remain
wish you a
unaware,
peaceful holiday.
King Charles III performs a ritual so personal, so deeply meaningful, that he has never spoken of it publicly in his 75 years of life. This tradition, passed down through whispered words from his beloved grandmother Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, has shaped every Christmas morning since he was 7 years old. What happens behind the closed doors of his private chambers during those precious minutes before the royal household awakens? What tradition could be so sacred that a man who has lived his entire life under public scrutiny keeps it completely hidden from the world? The answer lies not in royal protocol or ancient ceremony, but in a promise made to a dying woman who understood that even future kings need moments of pure, unguarded humanity. This is the story of how a simple Christmas morning tradition became the foundation of Charles's entire understanding of what it truly means to serve, to remember, and to honor those who came before. The alarm on King Charles's bedside table buzzes softly at 6:45 a.m. on Christmas morning 2023. Unlike the ornate timepieces scattered throughout Windsor Castle, this particular clock is remarkably ordinary, a simple digital device he purchased himself decades ago and has carried with him through every royal residence. The staff members who occasionally glimpse it during their duties often wonder why the King of England relies on such a humble timepiece, but none have ever dared to ask. Charles silences the alarm with practiced precision, his movements careful not to disturb Queen Camilla, who sleeps peacefully beside him. The winter darkness still blankets the castle grounds, and the ancient stone walls hold a profound stillness that exists nowhere else in his daily life. These moments before dawn represent something precious, a brief window of time that belongs entirely to him, free from the weight of crown and duty. He rises silently, his bare feet touching the cold floor as he reaches for the worn burgundy robe hanging on the bedpost. This robe, too, carries history that only he knows. The fabric has faded from its original rich color, and the left sleeve bears a small mend where it caught on a rose thorn in the gardens of Clarence House 15 years ago. Camilla has suggested replacing it numerous times, but Charles always finds reasons to postpone such decisions. Moving with the quiet confidence of someone who has navigated these pre-dawn rituals for over 6 decades, Charles makes his way to his private study. The room sits adjacent to the royal bedchamber, accessible through a door that remains locked to all staff. Even his most trusted valets understand that this space requires no maintenance during the Christmas season. The king cleans it himself, dusts the surfaces with his own hands, and ensures that everything remains exactly as he needs it to be. The study itself would surprise anyone expecting royal grandeur. While the furniture is certainly fine, a mahogany desk inherited from his grandfather King George VI, leather-bound books lining built-in shelves, and a comfortable reading chair positioned near the window, the room lacks the formal magnificence associated with royal spaces. Personal photographs crowd every available surface, many in simple frames that could be found in any family home. Letters rest in neat stacks, held together with ordinary rubber bands rather than ribbon or cord. Charles settles into the reading chair and reaches for a wooden box positioned on the small table beside it. The box itself tells a story, crafted from English oak by a carpenter in the Cotswolds. It bears no royal insignia or gold leaf. Instead, its surface shows the gentle wear of countless handlings, the wood polished smooth by decades of careful use. The brass hinges have developed a patina that speaks of age and devotion. Inside the box, wrapped in tissue paper that Charles replaces annually, lies a collection of items that would mean little to outside observers but represent the foundation of his entire understanding of Christmas morning. The first item is a letter, written in the careful script of Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, dated December 24, 1962. Charles was 14 years old when she pressed this letter into his hands, making him promise to read it every Christmas morning for the rest of his life. The letter paper has yellowed slightly, and the ink has faded to a soft brown, but every word remains clearly legible. Charles unfolds it with reverence, his eyes immediately finding the opening lines that have anchored every Christmas morning since his adolescence. My dearest Charles, the letter begins, if you are reading this, then another year has passed and Christmas morning has arrived. I pray that wherever you are, whatever responsibilities rest upon your shoulders, you will remember that this day belongs not to the crown, but to your heart. Charles continues reading, though he could recite every word from memory. The Queen Mother wrote about the importance of gratitude, about remembering those who came before, and about the responsibility that comes with great privilege. But, more than that, she wrote about love, the kind of love that exists between family members, the love that connects generation to generation, and the love that makes the burden of royal duty bearable. The letter concludes with a specific instruction that Charles has followed without fail. before you join your family, before you fulfill your Christmas duties, spend these quiet minutes remembering everyone who has loved you, everyone who has guided you, and everyone who has made sacrifices so that you might serve our people well. Let their voices speak to you in the silence, and carry their strength with you throughout the day. After finishing the letter, Charles carefully refolds it and returns it to the tissue paper. He then removes the second item from the box, a small prayer book that belonged to his father, Prince Philip. The book shows extensive use, with handwritten notes filling the margins and certain passages underlined multiple times. Philip had given it to Charles during his final Christmas, explaining that some traditions matter more than others and that faith, however personal and private, provides the foundation for all meaningful service. Charles opens the prayer book to a page marked with a thin blue ribbon. The passage, from the Book of Common Prayer, speaks about service, humility, and the responsibility of leadership. But Philip's handwritten note in the margin reveals the real reason for this daily reading: remember that every person you meet carries burdens you cannot see. Your privilege is the opportunity to lighten those burdens, not to add to them. The third item in the box is perhaps the most personal, a small photograph of Charles as a young boy, standing between his grandmother and his father in the gardens of Royal Lodge. The photograph captures a moment of genuine family happiness, all three figures laughing at something beyond the camera's view. Charles keeps this photograph not for its historical value, but because it reminds him of who he was before the world began shaping him into who he needed to become. The fourth and final item changes each year. This Christmas morning, it is a letter from a veteran he met during a recent visit to a military hospital. The veteran, a young woman who lost her leg in Afghanistan, had thanked Charles for his time and attention. But her words went deeper than gratitude. She spoke about the importance of remembering why service matters, about the people who sacrifice everything for causes larger than themselves, and about the responsibility that comes with the ability to make a difference in others' lives. Charles reads this letter slowly, absorbing not just the words but the spirit behind them. The veteran's courage, her grace in the face of profound loss, and her continued dedication to helping other injured soldiers represent everything Charles believes about true nobility. She possesses qualities that cannot be inherited or bestowed by ceremony, they must be earned through choices made in moments of testing. As he returns each item to the box, Charles reflects on the weight of these Christmas morning reminders. The letter from his grandmother teaches him about continuity and love. The prayer book from his father emphasizes service and humility. The photograph reminds him of joy and family bonds that transcend royal protocol. The changing fourth item connects him to the contemporary world and the people he has been called to serve. The entire ritual takes exactly 27 minutes, a duration that has remained consistent for over 60 years. Charles has performed these readings in various locations: Buckingham Palace, Sandringham House, Highgrove, and now Windsor Castle. He has read them while grieving the loss of loved ones, while celebrating the births of his children and grandchildren, and while navigating the various crises that have marked his long journey toward the throne. The constancy of this tradition has provided stability through decades of change. When his marriage to Diana collapsed under public scrutiny, when his mother died and the weight of the crown settled upon his shoulders, when criticism mounted about his various causes and opinions, these Christmas morning minutes offered an anchor point, a reminder of who he is beneath the titles and responsibilities. As the first hints of dawn begin to filter through the study windows, Charles carefully closes the wooden box and returns it to its position on the table. Soon, the castle will awaken. Staff members will begin their Christmas morning duties, family members will gather for breakfast, and the day's official obligations will commence. But, for now, in these final moments of solitude, Charles allows himself to sit quietly and absorb the lessons that have guided him through 7 decades of life. The silence in the study feels sacred, charged with the presence of all those who have shaped his understanding of duty, service, and love. His grandmother's wisdom, his father's strength, and the continuing examples of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all of these voices speak to him in the stillness, preparing him for another day of service, another opportunity to justify the trust placed in him by circumstance of birth and choice of character. Charles rises from the chair, adjusts his robe, and prepares to rejoin the world of royal obligations. But he carries with him the strength drawn from this private communion with the people and principles that have made him who he is. The Christmas morning tradition will remain his secret, but its influence will touch every interaction, every decision, and every moment of service that fills the day ahead. The morning light strengthens as Charles makes his way back to the bedchamber, where Camilla has begun to stir. She opens her eyes as he quietly closes the study door behind him, offering him the warm smile that has comforted him through countless mornings over their many years together. She knows about his Christmas morning ritual, though they have never discussed its specific details. Some aspects of marriage, she learned long ago, involve respecting the private spaces that each person needs to maintain their sense of self. "Happy Christmas, darling," she murmurs, reaching for his hand as he sits on the edge of the bed. "Happy Christmas," he responds, squeezing her fingers gently. The simple exchange carries weight that goes beyond the words themselves. Camilla understands that these early morning minutes have prepared him for the day ahead, though she could never imagine the depth of connection he feels to the voices that speak to him in the silence of his study. Together, they move through their morning preparations with the comfortable efficiency of a long partnership. Charles shaves with the same straight razor he has used for 30 years, a wedding gift from his grandmother that has served him faithfully through decades of daily use. As he draws the blade carefully along his jaw, he thinks about the conversation he had with the Queen Mother the morning she gave him the letter that now anchors his Christmas tradition. That conversation took place in her private sitting room at Clarence's house, where she had summoned him for what she called an important discussion about the nature of duty. Charles had assumed she wanted to discuss his studies or his upcoming royal engagements, but, instead, she spoke about the loneliness that comes with royal life and the importance of creating private rituals that connect a person to their deepest values. "The crown will give you many things, Charles," she had said, her voice carrying the authority that came from decades of supporting the monarchy through war, scandal, and social change. "But it will also try to take away the most important thing you possess, your authentic connection to yourself and to the people you are called to serve. You must fight to maintain that connection, and you must do it deliberately, regularly, and privately." She had explained that the letter was meant to serve as a weekly reminder, read every Sunday morning, but, as the years passed, Charles found that Christmas morning felt like the more appropriate time for such deep reflection. Christmas represented renewal, gratitude, and connection to something larger than oneself. The Christmas morning reading became his way of honoring not just his grandmother's wisdom, but the spirit of the season itself. As Charles adjusts his tie in the bedroom mirror, he can hear the subtle sounds of the castle awakening around him. Footsteps echo in distant corridors as staff members begin their preparations for the day's festivities. The smell of breakfast cooking drifts up from the kitchens, carrying hints of traditional Christmas morning fare: eggs, bacon, fresh bread, and the special marmalade that has been served at royal breakfast tables for generations. But Charles knows that before he can join his family for breakfast, he must complete the second part of his Christmas morning tradition. While the reading of the letter and prayer book represents communion with the past, the next phase involves connection with the present, specifically, with people who might otherwise spend Christmas morning alone. Charles makes his way to a different room entirely, one that even Camilla has never seen. Located in a tower section of Windsor Castle that underwent private renovation during his early years as king, this room serves as his personal communications center. Unlike the official offices where he conducts state business, this space exists solely for his private charitable work, the acts of service that receive no publicity and serve no official purpose beyond his own need to make a direct, personal difference in individual lives. The room contains a simple desk, a secure telephone line, and a carefully maintained file cabinet that holds information about dozens of people across Britain who have come to his attention through various channels. These are individuals facing particular hardships: elderly people without family, veterans struggling with injuries or trauma, single parents dealing with overwhelming challenges, or young people who have overcome significant obstacles to build meaningful lives. Charles has been building this list for over 20 years, adding new names while carefully maintaining relationships with people he has supported through previous Christmas mornings. The connections began almost accidentally, when he learned about an elderly man in Yorkshire who had lost his wife and was spending Christmas alone for the first time in 57 years. Charles called the man personally, spending 30 minutes in conversation about his wife's life, their shared memories, and the veteran's plans for adjusting to solitude. That first call revealed something profound about the power of personal connection. The veteran, who had served in the Falklands conflict, had been struggling not just with loneliness but with a sense that his service had been forgotten by the country he had defended. Charles's call, which included detailed questions about the veteran's military experience and genuine interest in his current activities, provided something that no government program or charity organization could offer: recognition from someone whose opinion mattered and whose attention represented genuine respect rather than obligation. The success of that first call led Charles to develop a more systematic approach. He began identifying people through his various public engagements, through letters sent to royal offices, and through discreet inquiries made by trusted staff members. the list grew to include teachers who had spent their own money to support struggling students, healthcare workers who went beyond their duties to care for patients, volunteers who dedicated their time to supporting others, and ordinary citizens who had shown extraordinary courage in difficult circumstances. Each Christmas morning, Charles selects 5 to 7 people from his list and calls them personally. These conversations follow no script and serve no official purpose. He simply wants to connect with people whose lives demonstrate the qualities he most admires: service, resilience, kindness, and the determination to make their corners of the world better despite receiving little recognition for their efforts. This Christmas morning, his first call goes to Margaret, a retired teacher from Cornwall who has spent the past 3 years providing free tutoring to children whose families cannot afford extra educational support. Charles learned about Margaret through a letter she sent to Buckingham Palace, not requesting anything for herself but advocating for increased funding for rural education programs. "Margaret? This is Charles," he says when she answers the phone, using the informal introduction he has developed for these calls. "I hope I'm not disturbing your Christmas morning." The conversation that follows lasts nearly 20 minutes. Margaret, initially shocked to be receiving a personal call from the king, quickly relaxes as Charles demonstrates genuine interest in her tutoring work. He asks specific questions about the children she helps, the subjects that pose the greatest challenges, and her thoughts about improving educational opportunities in rural communities. But Charles also inquires about Margaret's own Christmas plans, her health, and her family. He discovers that she lost her husband 2 years ago and that her adult children live too far away to visit for Christmas. Without making it the focus of the conversation, Charles ensures that Margaret knows her work matters, that her dedication has been noticed, and that she is not forgotten by those in positions to recognize exceptional service. The second call goes to David, a young man from Manchester who survived a serious car accident and has spent the past year learning to walk again while simultaneously completing his university degree in engineering. David had written to Charles during his recovery, not requesting assistance but expressing gratitude for the king's support for disabled veterans and asking if similar programs might be developed for young civilians facing similar challenges. Charles's conversation with David focuses on his recovery progress, his studies, and his plans for using his engineering skills to develop better rehabilitation equipment. But it also touches on David's determination, his refusal to let the accident define his possibilities, and his desire to help other young people facing similar challenges. The third call connects Charles with Sarah, a single mother in Wales who has been caring for her elderly neighbor while working 2 jobs and raising her own children. Sarah came to Charles's attention through a local charity worker who mentioned her extraordinary kindness and the quiet way she ensures that her neighbor, who has no family, never feels abandoned or forgotten. Each conversation follows a similar pattern. Charles begins by expressing genuine interest in the person's work or circumstances. He asks thoughtful questions that demonstrate he has taken time to learn about their lives before making the call. He listens carefully to their responses, often asking follow-up questions that show he is processing not just their words but the emotions and experiences behind them. But, more importantly, Charles ensures that each person understands that their efforts have been noticed and valued. He speaks specifically about the qualities he sees in their actions: courage, compassion, determination, selflessness, and explains how their examples inspire him in his own work. The fourth call goes to Robert, a veteran who has been organizing support groups for other veterans struggling with post-traumatic stress. Robert's work began after he lost a close friend to suicide and realized that formal support systems, while valuable, cannot replace the understanding that comes from shared experience. Charles's conversation with Robert touches on the challenges facing veterans, the importance of peer support, and Robert's thoughts about improving mental health services. But Charles also asks about Robert's own healing journey, his family, and his hopes for the future. The conversation reveals not just Robert's dedication to helping others, but his own ongoing struggle to process difficult experiences while building a meaningful life. The fifth and final call connects Charles with Emma, a young doctor who has been volunteering at a clinic serving homeless individuals while completing her medical residency. Emma came to Charles's attention through her supervisor, who mentioned her unusual ability to connect with patients who have been failed by other healthcare systems. The conversation with Emma explores the challenges of providing healthcare to vulnerable populations, the systemic issues that contribute to homelessness, and Emma's innovative approaches to building trust with patients who have learned to be suspicious of institutions. But Charles also asks about Emma's own motivation, her career goals, and her thoughts about improving healthcare access for marginalized communities. Each of these conversations provides Charles with something he cannot find anywhere else in his official duties: direct contact with people whose lives demonstrate the qualities that make service meaningful. These individuals face real challenges and find ways to respond with grace, determination, and concern for others. Their examples remind Charles why his position matters and how he might use his influence to support similar efforts. As he completes the final call, Charles sits quietly in his private communications room, absorbing the inspiration he has drawn from these conversations. The people he has spoken with today face challenges far greater than anything in his own experience, yet they approach their difficulties with courage and use their circumstances as opportunities to help others. The morning light now fills the castle completely, and Charles knows that his family will soon gather for breakfast. The official Christmas schedule will begin, with its carefully planned activities and formal obligations. But he carries with him the strength and perspective he has gained from his private Christmas morning tradition, both the communion with those who shaped his understanding of duty and the connection with those who continue to demonstrate what service looks like in daily life. Charles makes his way through the castle corridors toward the family breakfast room, but he pauses at a window overlooking the long walk. The winter morning has brought frost that transforms the landscape into something almost magical, with each blade of grass outlined in silver and the ancient oak trees standing like sentinels against the pale sky. This view has grounded him for decades, reminding him that some things endure beyond the immediate pressures of royal duty and public expectation. Standing at this window, Charles reflects on how his private Christmas morning tradition has evolved over the years. What began as simple obedience to his grandmother's request has become the foundation of his entire approach to leadership. The morning reading connects him to the wisdom of those who came before, while the personal phone calls connect him to the living examples of service that continue to inspire his work. But there is a third element to his Christmas morning ritual, one that has developed organically over the past 15 years. After completing his calls to individuals who inspire him, Charles spends time writing personal notes to people who have supported him through the challenges of royal life, not the official staff whose work is recognized through formal channels, but the individuals who have provided unofficial guidance, encouragement, and friendship during difficult periods. These letters, written by hand on personal stationery, go to people like Professor Jonathan Miller, the historian who helped Charles understand how previous monarchs navigated periods of social change, or Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the physician who cared for his mother during her final illness and who provided Charles with honest assessments about her condition when official briefings remained optimistically vague. Charles also writes to individuals whose paths crossed with his at crucial moments and who offered wisdom that shaped his decisions. This includes Michael Harrison, the head gardener at Highgrove, who taught Charles that environmental stewardship requires patience, persistence, and willingness to work with natural systems rather than trying to dominate them. Michael's lessons about organic farming and sustainable land management became the foundation for many of Charles's environmental initiatives. Another letter goes to Father Thomas Mackenzie, the priest who provided spiritual counsel during Charles's difficult separation from Diana and who helped him understand that public service must be rooted in genuine humility rather than mere duty. Father Mackenzie never sought publicity for his role in Charles's life, never wrote books about their conversations, and never used his connection to the royal family for personal advancement. Each of these thank you letters acknowledges not just specific help but the ongoing influence these individuals have had on Charles's development as a leader and as a person. He writes about lessons learned, principles absorbed, and moments when their guidance made the difference between making a wise decision and making a merely expedient one. The letter to Professor Miller, for example, expresses gratitude for helping Charles understand that constitutional monarchy must evolve to remain relevant without losing its essential character. Miller's historical perspective taught Charles that successful monarchs throughout British history have been those who recognized when to adapt traditions rather than simply preserving them unchanged. The letter to Dr. Hartwell acknowledges her compassion during an extraordinarily difficult time and thanks her for treating the royal family as human beings dealing with grief rather than as institutions requiring special handling. Her straightforward communication about medical realities helped Charles make informed decisions about his mother's care while preparing emotionally for the inevitable transition of the crown. The letter to Michael Harrison celebrates 15 years of friendship and collaboration in developing Highgrove's gardens as a demonstration of sustainable agricultural practices. Charles writes about how Michael's patient teaching helped him understand that environmental leadership requires personal commitment demonstrated through daily choices rather than merely public advocacy. The letter to Father Mackenzie reflects on the ongoing value of their conversations about faith, service, and the responsibility that comes with privilege. Charles acknowledges that the priest's guidance helped him develop a mature understanding of his role that goes beyond protocol and ceremony to embrace genuine service to the common good. But perhaps the most important letter goes to someone whose influence shaped Charles's entire approach to Christmas morning traditions. Lady Susan Hussey, who served as lady-in-waiting to his mother for over 60 years, provided Charles with invaluable insight into the daily pressures faced by the monarch and the importance of maintaining personal practices that preserve one's sense of authentic purpose. Lady Susan watched Queen Elizabeth II navigate decades of social change, family crisis, and constitutional evolution while maintaining her commitment to service and her connection to the values that made monarchy meaningful. Through countless informal conversations, often during family gatherings or private moments between official events, Lady Susan shared observations about what sustained the Queen through difficult periods. These insights helped Charles understand that effective monarchy requires more than performing official duties competently. It demands maintaining genuine concern for the people being served, continuous learning about the changing needs of society, and personal practices that prevent the isolation of privilege from undermining one's ability to understand and respond to real human challenges. Lady Susan also helped Charles appreciate the importance of building relationships with people whose judgment he could trust completely, individuals who would tell him difficult truths when necessary and who would support him through periods of criticism or uncertainty. She introduced him to many of the people who became his most valued advisors, not through formal recommendations but through gradual inclusion in conversations and activities that revealed character over time. The letter Charles writes to Lady Susan each Christmas expresses gratitude that goes far beyond specific instances of help or advice. He acknowledges her role in preparing him for the responsibilities he now carries and in helping him understand that successful service requires both public competence and private authenticity. After completing his letters, Charles seals each envelope personally and adds them to a stack that will be delivered later that morning by his private secretary. These letters represent another form of connection, not to those who need his support, but to those whose support has made his service possible. The entire process of reading, calling, and writing takes approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. Charles has become so accustomed to this routine that he can complete it efficiently while still giving full attention to each element. The timing allows him to finish before the official Christmas schedule begins, but after he has drawn strength and perspective from his private communion with the influences that guide his approach to leadership. As Charles finally makes his way toward the breakfast room, he encounters the first signs of the day's official activities. Staff members move through the corridors with the quiet efficiency that characterizes royal household operations, preparing for the various Christmas events that will fill the day. But Charles carries with him the calm focus that his morning tradition provides, along with the renewed sense of purpose that comes from connecting with both the wisdom of the past and the inspiring examples of the present. The breakfast room overlooks the castle's private gardens, where winter light plays across carefully maintained lawns and bare tree branches that will burst into life again with the coming spring. Charles has eaten breakfast in this room thousands of times, but Christmas morning always feels different because of the perspective he brings to it after completing his private rituals. Camilla arrives shortly after Charles, followed by other family members who are spending Christmas at Windsor. The conversation flows easily between personal news, plans for the day's activities, and gentle teasing about various family traditions. But underlying the casual atmosphere is an awareness that Christmas Day includes significant public responsibilities, the Christmas broadcast, charitable visits, and various ceremonial obligations that connect the royal family to the broader British public. Charles participates fully in the family conversation while maintaining an internal awareness of the lessons he has absorbed during his morning solitude. The letter from his grandmother reminds him that family relationships provide the foundation for all meaningful service. The prayer book from his father emphasizes that leadership must be grounded in humility and genuine concern for others. The phone calls to inspiring individuals connect him to examples of service that continue to evolve with changing circumstances. Together, these influences prepare Charles to approach the day's obligations not as burdens to be endured but as opportunities to demonstrate the values that have been passed down through generations and continue to find expression in contemporary examples of courage, compassion, and commitment to the common good. The breakfast conversation gradually turns to the practical details of the Christmas schedule. There will be a visit to a local care home, where Charles will spend time with elderly residents who have no family visitors during the holidays. The Christmas broadcast will be recorded in the afternoon, focusing on themes of community support and individual responsibility for collective welfare. Various charitable organizations will receive recognition for their work throughout the year. Each of these activities connects directly to insights Charles has gained through his morning tradition. The care home visit reflects his grandmother's emphasis on remembering those who might otherwise be forgotten. The Christmas broadcast provides an opportunity to share his father's lessons about service and humility. The charitable recognition allows him to highlight contemporary examples of the kind of inspiring service he encounters through his personal phone calls. The integration between Charles's private Christmas morning tradition and his public Christmas responsibilities is seamless but deliberate. The wisdom he absorbs in solitude shapes how he approaches every interaction throughout the day. The strength he draws from connecting with the past and present enables him to fulfill his obligations with authentic engagement rather than mere dutiful performance. As breakfast concludes and family members begin dispersing to prepare for the day's activities, Charles takes a moment to appreciate the continuity that spans from his private morning reflection to his public Christmas service. The tradition that began with his grandmother's letter has become the foundation for everything he hopes to accomplish as king, connecting the wisdom of the past with the needs of the present while maintaining authentic commitment to the welfare of the people he serves. The first public engagement of Christmas Day takes Charles to Riverside Care Home, a facility for elderly residents located just 15 minutes from Windsor Castle. This visit, while officially scheduled and coordinated by his staff, carries personal significance that stems directly from his morning conversations. 3 of the residents he will meet today were recommended by people he called earlier, individuals who mention neighbors, relatives, or friends who spend holidays in institutional care despite having lived full, contributing lives. Charles arrives at Riverside without the full ceremonial protocols that mark many royal visits. The small security detail remains discreet, and the press coverage is limited to a single photographer who will document the visit without interfering with personal interactions. This approach reflects Charles's understanding, learned through decades of public service, that meaningful encounters require genuine privacy even in public settings. The care home's director, Helen Morrison, greets Charles at the entrance with warm professionalism that immediately puts him at ease. Helen has managed Riverside for over 20 years and has developed an exceptional understanding of how to create dignity and purpose for elderly residents who often feel marginalized by a society focused on youth and productivity. Your Majesty, we're honored by your visit, Helen says, but, more importantly, our residents are excited to share their stories with someone who will genuinely listen. This comment reveals Helen's understanding of what distinguishes meaningful public service from mere ceremonial appearance. Charles has specifically requested time for extended conversations rather than brief greetings, and Helen has organized the visit to provide exactly that opportunity. The first resident Charles meets is Arthur Pemberton, a 93-year-old former shipbuilder who worked on vessels for the Royal Navy during the final years of his career. Arthur has been living at Riverside for 2 years, since mobility issues made independent living impossible, but his mind remains sharp and his memory of his working years vivid. I helped build ships that carried your mother on state visits, Arthur tells Charles with evident pride. HMS Britannia's final refit included work from our shipyard, and I always felt connected to the royal family through that project. Charles spends 20 minutes with Arthur, discussing not just his shipbuilding career but his thoughts about modern naval architecture, his memories of launching ceremonies he attended, and his concerns about the decline of British shipbuilding capabilities. The conversation reveals Arthur's continuing engagement with contemporary issues and his detailed knowledge about maritime defense requirements. But Charles also learns about Arthur's current life at Riverside, his friendship with other residents, and his weekly routine of reading to fellow residents who have vision problems. Arthur's commitment to helping others, even while dealing with his own limitations, exemplifies the kind of ongoing service that Charles encounters throughout his public engagements. The second extended conversation takes place with Margaret Dolby, an 87-year-old former teacher who spent 43 years educating children in rural schools across 3 different counties. Margaret came to Riverside after her adult children, living abroad, could no longer provide the daily support she needed following a series of minor strokes that affected her mobility but left her cognitive abilities intact. Teaching was never just a job for me, Margaret explains to Charles. Each child represented potential that needed nurturing, and I always believed that a good teacher could change the entire trajectory of a young person's life. Margaret's philosophy resonates deeply with Charles's own understanding of service and responsibility. During their conversation, she shares specific examples of former students who have gone on to achieve success in various fields, but she also discusses the systemic challenges that prevent many children from receiving the educational support they need to reach their potential. The children who needed the most help were often the ones whose families lacked resources to supplement classroom learning, Margaret continues. I spent my own money on books and supplies because I couldn't bear to see bright children held back by circumstances beyond their control. Charles recognizes in Margaret's commitment the same quality he encountered during his morning phone calls, the willingness to go beyond official duties to address genuine need. Margaret's example provides another reminder that meaningful service often requires personal sacrifice and that the most important work frequently receives little recognition or reward. The third conversation takes place with William Chen, an 81-year-old former engineer who immigrated to Britain from Hong Kong in the 1960s and spent his career designing infrastructure projects that improved transportation and communication throughout the Commonwealth. William's technical expertise contributed to projects that connected isolated communities to broader economic and social opportunities. When I arrived in Britain, I was determined to contribute something permanent to my new country, William tells Charles. Engineering appealed to me because it involves solving problems that improve people's daily lives in concrete, measurable ways. William's career included work on bridge construction in Scotland, telecommunications infrastructure in Wales, and water management systems in northern England. His projects required understanding local conditions, collaborating with diverse teams, and finding solutions that balance technical requirements with environmental considerations. The conversation reveals William's continuing fascination with technological innovation and his thoughtful observations about how infrastructure development affects community cohesion. But Charles also learns about William's current activities at Riverside, including his role in organizing recreational activities for other residents and his weekly sessions helping younger staff members understand maintenance issues. The fourth extended conversation connects Charles with Dorothy Evans, an 89-year-old former nurse who spent her career working in emergency departments and rural clinics across Wales. Dorothy's experience spans from the early days of the National Health Service through its evolution into a modern medical system, giving her unique insight into how healthcare policy affects individual patient care. Nursing taught me that healing involves much more than medical treatment, Dorothy explains to Charles. Patients need to feel heard, understood, and cared for as whole human beings, not just as collections of symptoms requiring technical intervention. Dorothy's perspective on healthcare emphasizes the importance of personal connection between caregivers and patients, a philosophy that shaped her entire career and continues to influence how she interacts with staff and fellow residents at Riverside. Her ability to provide comfort during medical crises earned her recognition throughout the Welsh healthcare system, but, more importantly, it demonstrated how technical competence must be combined with genuine compassion to achieve meaningful results. Charles's conversation with Dorothy touches on healthcare policy, the challenges facing modern medical systems, and the importance of maintaining human connection in increasingly technological treatment environments. But he also learns about Dorothy's current volunteer work with new Riverside residents, helping them adjust to institutional living while maintaining their sense of personal dignity and purpose. Each of these conversations provides Charles with insights that will influence his approach to public service throughout the coming year. Arthur's commitment to helping others despite his own limitations reminds Charles that service continues regardless of personal circumstances. Margaret's dedication to educational equity reinforces Charles's understanding of how privilege creates responsibility to address systemic inequality. William's focus on solving practical problems emphasizes the importance of connecting policy initiatives to measurable improvements in people's lives. Dorothy's integration of technical competence with personal compassion demonstrates how effective leadership requires both professional skill and genuine care for those being served. But, beyond these specific insights, the visit to Riverside provides Charles with something equally valuable: direct contact with people whose lives demonstrate that aging does not diminish the capacity for wisdom, contribution, and concern for others. The residents he meets continue to engage with contemporary issues, support fellow community members, and share knowledge gained through decades of experience. This understanding directly contradicts societal attitudes that treat aging as decline into irrelevance. Charles encounters people whose perspectives have been deepened by experience, whose judgment has been refined by weathering various challenges, and whose commitment to helping others has been strengthened rather than weakened by their own encounters with vulnerability. The visit concludes with a group gathering in Riverside's main community room, where Charles addresses all 47 residents together. Rather than delivering a formal speech, he shares observations about the conversations he has had and the lessons he has learned during his visit. "I came here today thinking I would be providing encouragement and recognition," Charles tells the assembled residents, "but instead I find myself grateful for the wisdom you have shared and inspired by the examples of ongoing service you continue to demonstrate." He speaks specifically about Arthur's commitment to reading for others, Margaret's volunteer tutoring, William's technical assistance to staff, and Dorothy's support for new residents. But he also acknowledges the broader truth that each person present continues to contribute to their community through daily choices about how to treat others, how to respond to difficulties, and how to use whatever abilities they retain in service of something larger than themselves. The response from residents reveals the power of genuine recognition from someone whose attention matters. Charles has not merely performed a ceremonial duty but has demonstrated authentic interest in their lives, their experiences, and their continuing contributions. The visit provides mutual benefit. Charles gains insight and inspiration that will influence his ongoing work, while residents receive acknowledgement that their lives continue to matter and their examples continue to teach important lessons. As Charles prepares to leave Riverside, Helen Morrison thanks him for the depth of engagement he has brought to the visit. But she also shares her observation that the conversations have energized residents in ways that will continue long after his departure. Your genuine interest in their stories has reminded them that their experiences have value beyond their personal memories, Helen explains. They feel seen and heard in ways that will influence how they think about themselves and their continuing possibilities. This feedback confirms Charles's understanding that meaningful public service involves authentic engagement rather than mere ceremonial presence. The morning tradition that prepares him for such engagements enables him to approach them with genuine curiosity about what he might learn rather than focus solely on what he might provide. The afternoon light filters through the tall windows of the blue drawing room at Windsor Castle as Charles prepares for the recording of his annual Christmas broadcast. This year's message, like all others, has been carefully crafted over several weeks, but the influence of his morning tradition and his visit to Riverside Care Home has added layers of meaning that go beyond the prepared text. The television crew works with quiet efficiency, adjusting lighting and camera angles while royal staff ensure that every detail reflects the dignity appropriate for a monarch's Christmas address to the nation. But Charles carries with him an awareness that this broadcast represents more than ceremonial obligation. It provides an opportunity to share insights gained through his private communion with voices from the past and his direct encounters with contemporary examples of service. Standing before the camera, Charles begins his address with words that connect directly to lessons learned earlier that morning. Today, as we gather with families and friends to celebrate Christmas, I am reminded that the deepest meaning of this season lies not in the gifts we exchange, but in the recognition we give to those who demonstrate the true spirit of service throughout the year. The broadcast continues with Charles sharing specific examples of service he has encountered, though without revealing the personal nature of his Christmas morning phone calls. He speaks about teachers who spend their own resources to support struggling students, healthcare workers who provide comfort alongside medical treatment, veterans who support fellow veterans through difficult transitions, and volunteers who ensure that vulnerable community members are never forgotten. Each example draws directly from his morning conversations, though he carefully protects the privacy of individuals while highlighting the principles their actions demonstrate. The teacher in Cornwall becomes a representative of educators everywhere who go beyond their official duties. The young engineer recovering from his accident represents the determination shown by people who refuse to let circumstances define their possibilities. The single mother caring for her elderly neighbor exemplifies the quiet kindness that binds communities together. These individuals remind us that service takes many forms, Charles continues, and that the greatest contributions often come from people who seek no recognition for their efforts but simply respond to need with whatever abilities they possess. The broadcast moves naturally into themes that connect Charles's private reflections with broader social concerns. Drawing on his father's lessons about humility and his grandmother's emphasis on gratitude, Charles addresses the responsibility that comes with privilege and the importance of using advantage to benefit others rather than merely to increase personal comfort. Those of us who have been given much, whether through birth, circumstance, or achievement, bear particular responsibility to ensure that our advantages contribute to the common good, Charles states. This responsibility cannot be fulfilled through occasional charitable gestures but requires ongoing commitment to understanding and addressing the challenges faced by those with fewer resources and opportunities. The message reflects Charles's understanding, gained through decades of public service and reinforced by his morning tradition, that constitutional monarchy must demonstrate genuine value to society through continuous service rather than merely preserving historical institutions. The crown's relevance depends on its ability to connect tradition with contemporary needs and to provide leadership that serves the common good rather than narrow interests. Charles concludes his broadcast with words that directly echo his grandmother's letter, though without revealing their source. As we move forward into another year, let us remember that our individual actions, however small they might seem, contribute to the larger story of our shared community. Each choice to help rather than ignore, to include rather than exclude, to encourage rather than criticize, adds to the foundation of a society worthy of our highest aspirations. The recording concludes, but Charles remains in the blue drawing room for several minutes, reflecting on how his private Christmas morning tradition has shaped the public message he has just delivered. The seamless integration between personal reflection and public service demonstrates how authentic leadership must be grounded in genuine values rather than merely performed according to external expectations. As evening approaches, Charles makes his way to his study for the final element of his Christmas Day tradition. while the morning hours were devoted to connection with influences that shape his understanding of service, and the afternoon was dedicated to public demonstration of that understanding, the evening provides time for private reflection on lessons learned throughout the day. Charles opens a leather-bound journal that he has maintained for over 25 years, recording observations and insights that help him process experiences and identify patterns that might guide future decisions. Tonight's entry begins with reflections on the conversations at Riverside Care Home and the ways those encounters reinforced lessons from his morning reading and phone calls. Arthur's commitment to reading for fellow residents demonstrates that service continues regardless of personal limitations, Charles writes. His example connects to fathers teaching about finding ways to contribute even when circumstances restrict our options. The journal entry continues with observations about Margaret's educational philosophy and how it reflects the same concern for individual potential that Charles encountered during his morning conversation with the young doctor serving homeless populations. Both women understand that effective service requires seeing beyond immediate circumstances to recognize and nurture underlying possibilities. Charles also records thoughts about William's engineering career and how it exemplifies the importance of solving practical problems that improve people's daily lives. This connects to his grandmother's emphasis on service that makes tangible differences rather than merely symbolic gestures. The journal entry includes reflections on Dorothy's integration of technical competence with personal compassion, noting how this combination appears consistently among people who achieve meaningful results in their service to others. Charles recognizes this pattern from his morning phone calls and from countless interactions throughout his years of public engagements. But the evening reflection goes beyond documenting individual insights to consider larger questions about the role of constitutional monarchy in contemporary society. Charles writes about the responsibility to demonstrate that traditional institutions can serve modern needs when they are guided by authentic commitment to the common good rather than mere preservation of historical privilege. The Crown's legitimacy depends not on inherited authority but on continuous demonstration of service that justifies public support, Charles notes. Each interaction, each decision, each use of influence must contribute to the welfare of those we are called to serve. The journal entry concludes with thoughts about the integration between private reflection and public service. Charles recognizes that his Christmas morning tradition has become essential preparation for meaningful engagement with his royal responsibilities. The wisdom gained through communion with past influences and contemporary examples provides the foundation for authentic leadership that serves genuine needs rather than merely fulfilling ceremonial expectations. As Charles closes the journal and prepares for bed, he feels the deep satisfaction that comes from a day spent in service guided by clear values and authentic commitment. The morning tradition that began with simple obedience to his grandmother's request has evolved into the foundation of his entire approach to constitutional monarchy. Tomorrow will bring different challenges and opportunities, but Charles will face them with the strength and perspective gained through his private Christmas morning communion with the voices that guide his understanding of service. The tradition will continue, providing constant connection to the principles that make public service meaningful and the examples that demonstrate how those principles can be applied in contemporary circumstances. The Christmas day concludes with Charles experiencing the profound gratitude that his grandmother hoped he would find through regular reflection on the privileges and responsibilities of his position. But, more than gratitude, he feels the renewed commitment that comes from connecting with living examples of service that continue to inspire and challenge his own efforts to serve with distinction. In the silence of his private quarters, surrounded by the history and tradition of Windsor Castle, Charles carries forward the legacy of service that spans generations while remaining responsive to the evolving needs of contemporary society. The private tradition that shapes his approach to public service ensures that his leadership remains grounded in authentic values rather than mere ceremonial performance. The Christmas morning ritual that began as a young prince's promise to his grandmother has become a mature monarch's foundation for meaningful service. Through communion with the wisdom of the past and engagement with inspiring examples of the present, Charles prepares himself daily to fulfill the responsibilities that history and circumstance have placed upon him. As sleep comes to Windsor Castle on Christmas night, King Charles III carries with him the peace that comes from service guided by clear values and the anticipation of continuing opportunities to demonstrate that constitutional monarchy can serve contemporary needs when it is practiced with authentic commitment to the common good. The tradition continues, strengthening with each year and providing the foundation for service that honors both the past and the present while preparing for the challenges and opportunities of the future.